The saying, "the apple doesn't fall far from the tree," suggests that whatever qualities you possess, your children will have too. This is very true since the developing mind of a child is affected by both genetics and the environment. This early stage of development has the most impact on growth, meaning anything that happens during this time will affect how you turn out. Children learn by experience and by following what their parents do, so when there is significant neglect or abuse in a home, it is a disaster. The child's mental, psychological, and emotional states are compromised, as well as their cognitive and behavioral developments. This affects them into their adulthood. I have first-hand experience of what it is like. This all serves as my support to provide insight on an issue that plagues many families around the world today, and that is that neglectful parenting practices and abuse will negatively affect a child into adulthood, which will then result in the child continuing these same behaviors with their own children in a reoccurring cycle known as intergenerational abuse. Now, there is no denotative definition of what bad parenting is, but I did find one from Rohit Guru, who has an MBA in developmental psychology. He says the definition of bad parenting is not a single act of poor nurturing, but rather a series of such actions that invariably harm the little one's demeanor or psychology. A list made by Mayhawk Aurora from FirstCry.com of incidences of poor parenting include things like reprimanding excessively, severe discipline, withholding of affection, constantly comparing the child to others and not being proud of their achievements. They also include a constant criticizing tone, no respect in feelings, giving very few to no choices, lack of trust, and not giving them enough of your time. Behaviors that set poor examples include things like alcoholism, addiction, divorce, domestic violence, and verbal and emotional abuse. Now, not all of these factors need to be present for it to be abuse. It becomes abuse when it has direct negative effects on a child's well-being, including their physical, mental, and emotional states. A common term is familiar abuse, which is any kind of abuse that takes place domestically or in the immediate family. Most cases are parent-child. Now we will reflect on how abuse affects a child. Children who suffer from this are certain to experience some degree of emotional turmoil. The brain does the most developing during this stage, and the child's developmental process, cognitive functions, behavioral development, and psychosociality are also all forming. This stage is the most crucial and can hinder the growth process. Aurora also includes effects of adverse impacts to include antisocial behaviors, depression, aggression, lack of empathy, and difficulty with relationships. Others include trust issues, feelings of guilt, lack of initiative, inability to relax and be themselves, low self-esteem and self-worth, and lack of independence. Dee Wilson, who has a master's in social work, has stated that severe early childhood neglect can lead to early onset mood disorders and/or externalizing behavior problems. Effects of poor parenting can also cause the child to display their stress through physical behaviors. Some children will have the appearance of being withdrawn or detached, shy or nonverbal, constantly nervous, lash out or fight, act impulsively, have emotional episodes, and do poorly in school. Being abused does not necessarily cause psychological and medical illness to occur. However, Catherine Patricelli, who has a master's degree in counseling and psychological services, has stated that being abused does make it much more likely that one or more psychological or medical illnesses will occur. These problems start in childhood and more often than not continue into adulthood. These children suffer long-term consequences into adulthood. A quote from Catherine Patricelli states, "Victimized people commonly develop emotional or psychological problems." Patricelli has also observed that if abuse occurred from a very early age and has been substantial, a personality disorder may occur. Such include borderline, narcissistic, or histrionic personality disorders, or even the severe dissociative identity disorder. Licensed marriage and family therapist Carol McBride has stated, "I see clients who were neglected and most have symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder and significant trauma to resolve." Adolescents and adults with past abuse are also more likely to develop or partake in dangerous behaviors. The National Research Council has listed such actions to include delinquency, violence, becoming a runaway, intimacy or sexual problems in teenage pregnancy, alcohol problems, illicit drug use or abuse, self-destructive behaviors, depression, and suicide attempts. Adults with trauma are also more likely to partake in criminal behavior, develop an addiction, have troubles finding or maintaining a job, and experience difficulties in maintaining stable and positive relationships. Now, being abused does not mean someone will have a troubled adolescence or adulthood, or that someone will develop a psychological disorder or illness. It is just very likely that these will occur, especially if the abuse is substantial or severe. Adults that do develop disorders or partake in these behaviors may one day have children, and if their behaviors are not ended, they could pass them on to their children. The Collins Dictionary has defined the vicious circle as a problem or difficult situation that has the effect of creating new problems that then cause the original problem or situation to occur again. Apply abuse to this process, and the occurrence of abusive behavior continuing on to the next generation is what is known as intergenerational abuse. The chances that the child would display the same neglect as their parents did to them as they were children, and that their children will display that same neglect again, are sufficiently high. According to the National Research Council, the Kaufman and Ziegler report of 1987 estimated the rate of intergenerational transmission of abuse to be 30%. This means that about 1/3 of individuals abused or neglected as children will abuse their own children. Even if that doesn't seem big, that was the report from 33 years ago. So today we covered how bad parenting and neglect have shown to have lasting consequences on a child's well-being that the child then carries with them into adulthood. The presence of childhood abuse heightens the chances that when they become adults, they will commit the same behaviors onto their own children. The vicious cycle of intergenerational abuse spirals through generation after generation of dysfunctional family. Now, the one thing I want you to take home with you today is that this doesn't have to be the outcome of every abusive situation. You are one step closer to ending intergenerational abuse with the acknowledgement of its presence, and another step closer to ending it when you decide to change for the better. That is what I have learned from my personal battle with familiar abuse. Thank you for being present today and for listening to my speech.